This video is a comprehensive tutorial around dynamic zone visibility, which is a Tableau feature introduced in version 2022.3. There are two main parts to this video. The first part is the basics, where we cover what this feature is, what is needed to make it work, and a few tips on usage and usability. The second part walks through 4 common use cases. There's a chart swap, dependent filters and legends, slide out charts, as well as zooming in and out of certain charts. I've added chapters to the description below, so please feel free to jump to the sections you want to view. First, let's start with the what. What is dynamic zone visibility? I think it will be helpful if we break the name down to understand it better. With dynamic, it means that we don't have to necessarily rely on controls such as these in order to make something happen. Many of the dynamic components will involve parameters as well as parameter actions. As you may be aware, actions in Tableau mean that we can make something happen simply by hovering over a mark or clicking a mark. If you need a refresher on parameters and parameter actions, I've added a few videos to the card above and description below. For the second word, zone, it simply refers to an object. And when we talk about object, it could be any of the worksheets or any of the dashboard objects we can see in the sidebar when we're creating our dashboards. So these could be containers, could be a text box, could be an image, a blank, or any of these other objects. They also don't have to be grouped. We could be targeting a worksheet, as well as a filter, or 2 other charts inside the same container, or even just a single color legend. And the last word, visibility, refers to making things appear or disappear in our dashboards. You can find this new option called Control Visibility using Value in your dashboard sidebar under the Layout tab. Here we can pick either fields or parameters that either turn on or off a zone's visibility. When the value is true, it means it's going to be visible. When the value is false, it means it's going to be invisible. Now there are some restrictions. These fields or parameters must be Boolean, meaning they have a value of true or false, they must have a single value, and they must be independent of a viz. Usually when we say independent of a viz, it means that we're referring to fixed LOD expressions. Here is an example of a parameter that has a data type of Boolean, meaning the value is true or false, but we can also assign aliases that are easier to read or easier to understand. And these are examples of calculated fields that evaluate to true or false. So for example, we might be checking if a parameter is one of these values. And this is an example of a fixed LOD that can be used with dynamic zone visibility. So in summary, how do we work with dynamic zone visibility? What do we need? First, oftentimes, we are going to need a parameter. Second, we usually use this parameter to create a calculated field that evaluates to true or false. Third, we are going to use this new option under the Layout tab to control the visibility using either the parameter or our calculated field. Fourth, a lot of times we are going to take advantage of containers. And the big reason for this is for our containers, it allows us to expand or collapse the contents. So for example, if you have 2 things in a container, we can make it evenly spaced. However, if one of the objects disappear, it will not take up any more space, and the remaining object can now take over the full space. And the 5th step, typically we're going to add a parameter action. And the parameter action is what adds to this dynamic feel of the dynamic zone visibility, because we can run the action on hover, or on select, or even on a menu. Typically we're going to be using select, but hover and menu will also be options. Now some minor usage tips. I found it really helpful for me when I kept a consistent naming convention. For example, if all of the calculated fields are called visibility, I've also found using folders quite helpful as well, because there will be times you're going to be creating a lot of parameters or you might be creating a lot of calculated fields. Putting them all in the same place definitely helps clean up the clutter in your sidebar. And one more tip for usability, I would recommend telling people how to use the dashboards. Usually Tableau will have a lot of different kinds of functionalities, and people may not necessarily know how to work with our dashboards, especially the newer features. So we can take advantage of titles, text instructions, maybe tooltips, or maybe providing our own tutorials and training, especially for our internal audience and stakeholders. Now that we've finished talking about the basics, let's go over the use cases. Again, there's 4 different use cases. You have a chart swap, dependent filters and legends, we have slide out charts, as well as zoom in and out. With zoom in and out, it means that we can maximize a chart or minimize a chart. I also would like to call out special credits and thanks, especially to Samuel Parsons and Marc Reid. They are both Tableau visionaries, and their work has greatly helped me in understanding dynamic zone visibility. I am linking Samuel's Tableau public workbook in the description below, as well as Marc Reid's YouTube tutorial. Okay, on to the first use case. Our first use case is a chart swap. Essentially for this one, we're going to have a group of icons that will determine what type of chart we're going to show. I've already pre-created 3 charts for the first use case. We have a bar chart, a combo chart, and a scatter plot. I also have a helper Excel file that I will use whenever I need a list of values. So this Excel file now has 3 tabs. The first one is for the charts, and there's another couple ones that I will use later on. Do you need a helper file? No, you don't really need a helper file, but it just means that you're going to have to enter the values yourself instead of pulling them from a file. Okay, let's connect to this Excel file. This one is called charts, and in this worksheet called charts menu, and from the charts data source, let's right click on chart type, create, and then parameter. We're going to keep the values by default, but I'm going to add a 4th value, and I'm going to call this all. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to be able to test the parameters by showing one of the charts or all of the charts. It's going to help, especially when we're placing charts in containers. Let's also move all to the very top. Let's click OK. Now, first things first, let's test the parameter action. I have a dashboard in here that already has containers. So for this one, let's drag a horizontal container. Let's add text. In here, let's call this chosen chart. Let's also insert the parameter value from this text box. Parameters are technically global values, so we can reference them in text boxes. So insert parameter value, we're just going to change the color. I also want to add the parameter here. So under analysis, parameters, let's display our chart type parameter, and let's move this closer to our text box. And let's add a blank towards the end. Okay, so let's just quickly test it. Again, in here, it's very simple. We're just displaying the value of the parameter that is selected. Next, let's create the icons for the charts. Let's go back to the charts menu, and from here, we're going to change marks to shape. Now, I've also already added some custom shapes in my Tableau repository under the shapes folder. So our shapes palette should be able to pick this up. So again, in here, let's use the charts data source, and let's take the chart type, put that in shape. Let's double click on the shapes legend so that we can change each of the shapes. So double click in here on the drop down, selecting the new shape palette. And in here, the bar will be just this, combo will be that, scatter will be this one. And let's click on apply. Let's also add chart type to our columns. Resize this a little bit. Set to entire view. And let's add this to our dashboard. So charts menu to the right. We can remove the legend, and we can also hide the title, as well as the headers. Let's double click on the handlebar to select the container. Let's resize this a little bit, move things around. I'm just going to edit some of the widths. And let's remove the border for this worksheet. So under format, borders, and remove the row divider. I'm just going to resize the icons as well. So go to worksheet, resize the icons, and let's remove the tooltip. Okay, so now that we have our icons, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our parameter action so that when we click on any of these icons, we're going to see the parameter here change as well as what's being shown in our text box. So to do this, let's go to Dashboard, Actions, and from here, we're going to add an action, change parameter. Let's call this one Chart Swap. So our target is going to be the chart parameter, and the source field is coming from our chart type. Also, for clearing the selection, we're going to set the value to all. So we want to show all. Click on OK and OK. So again, let's give it a try. Bar, combo, scatter. And if I deselect, it should be all. Let's close the format sidebar. Let's also just make sure first that the height of the header will not change. So let's double click on the handlebar. And in here, I'm just going to fix the height. Let's also adjust the height of this blank, make this really small. So edit the height, maybe make this about 30. Now that we have some of the parameters in place, let's put our charts in. In here, we're going to use a container. We will use a horizontal container and we're going to put our bar, combo, and scatter side by side. Okay, let's add our horizontal container. We're going to put our bar, our combo right beside it, and our scatter plot. We're just going to move things around. So we have the bar, the combo should be in the middle. And in here, again, double click on the handlebar, select the container. Let's rename this. Let's call this main charts. And we are also going to distribute the contents evenly. Okay, we're almost there. So how do we make the magic happen? In the sidebar, there is a second tab. It's the layout tab. And this is the new option that's available for dynamic zone visibility. Now again, we need to supply this with either a parameter or a field that evaluates to true or false. But right now we have a little bit of a problem because we don't have any field that says when we click, let's say the bar icon, that this evaluates to true. So we're going to create 3 calculated fields, and each calculated field should evaluate to true when certain icons are clicked. So when should we get a true value for the bar chart? It should be true if we've selected all, and it should be true when we've selected bar. For the combo chart, it has to be true when we've selected all or if we've selected combo. Let's go back to one of the worksheets and let's create the 3 calculated fields. Let's create the first one, create calculated field. Let's call this bar visibility. And in here, the chart parameter has to be in either of 2 values, all or bar. Let's click OK. Let's make 2 copies of this, duplicate one time and a second time. And for the next one, right click, edit. This is going to be for scatter. And in here, scatter. And the last one will be for combo. Let's also organize our sidebar into folders. So in here on the drop down, group by folder, and I'm going to select all the calculated fields, all 3 of these, right click, and I'm going to add them to a folder called Dynamic Zone Visibility. And now we can go back to our dashboard. So for the bar chart, we're going to control this using our bar visibility. For the combo chart, we're going to control this using the combo visibility. And our scatter plot, we're going to control this using the scatter visibility. Let's give this a try. Bar, combo, scatter. And if we deselect everything, all 3 should show up again. So again, this is a very simple chart swap. And the key thing here is making sure that the 3 charts are in the same container. And you can double check this. When you go to your sidebar in the layout tab, you should be able to see the item hierarchy. And from here, again, we should be able to check. In this example, I've called the main container main charts. And in here, we should see bar, combo, and scatter. They should be in the same container. The second use case builds up on top of the first use case. Say, for example, there are filters that apply to only certain charts, but not all. So let's set this up. So for the bar chart, the filters are year and subcategory. For combo, you have year and region. For the scatter plot, you have year and segment. And for this particular chart, we may want to show our color legend as well. So let's set this up. Let's duplicate this dashboard. There's a few ways we can do this. How I'm going to tackle this is I'm going to create a container per set of filters, and we're simply going to show and hide those containers. Let's create our first horizontal container. And for now, I'm just going to put blanks as placeholders. So a couple of blanks, 1, 2. Let's set the height to 50. And let's say this one is for our bar. Let's change the background to gray. Add another container. Again, 2 blanks for now. 1, 2. Select the container, set the height to 50. Under layout, let's set the background to blue. Final container, 2 blanks. Double click, get the container, set the height to 50. Under layout, change the color to something orange. So you can kind of see in here, I'm trying to match the colors for the bar, the blue for the combo chart, and orange for our scatter plot. Now it's really just a matter of arranging all the filters now. So for example, for category sales, let's display the 2 filters under filter, order date, as well as subcategory. And let's move these 2 into the container. So in here, 1 and 2. So I'll just speed up the setup of the rest of the filters. Okay, now that we have it set up, it's really just going to be very similar to the chart swap. So in here, let's select each container. So the first one, under layout, control visibility using, again, this one is for the bar. For the second one, select the container, double click on a handlebar, control visibility, this one is using the combo. And for the last one, double click, control visibility using scatter plot. Let's give it a try. Bar, combo, scatter. For use case 3, we're still going to be working with the same ingredients. We're still going to be working with containers. The intention is whenever a cell or a year is selected, there is going to be a chart that shows up. In here, we're just going to call it a slide out chart just because it looks like it's a card that slides out. But in essence, this is just another chart inside a container that is padded with blanks. I've already pre-created some charts. We have a highlight table. We also have a line chart. Let's set up our dashboard first. So go to this dashboard. And in here, we're going to set up another series of containers. Essentially, we're going to have another container that has the chart on the left-hand side and another container that has padded blanks and the line chart on the right side. Go to dashboard. Let's add a horizontal container. Let's put some blanks first. The blanks will help keep the shape of the containers. Once we have that, I'm going to add a vertical container for the left chart. It's going to be our highlight table. And then another vertical container on the right-hand side. And remember, on the right-hand side, we are going to add the blanks. So top first, let's select the container first and make this evenly distributed so that we can get to the container. Let's put our bottom blank. Let's put our line chart right in the middle. We can now remove some of the placeholder blanks that we added earlier. Let's go here, move that. And we also don't need this legend. So let's just remove this one and remove this blank. Let's set this chart to entire view and let's just format this. So for these blanks, we're just going to make them a little bit bigger. Same for this one. And let's also just quickly format our slide out chart. So in here, let's add a border and maybe a background. Let's select the overall container. So in here, double click to get to the parent container and then one more because we want the main container. Double click again. Let's just rename this. Let's call this all charts. We're also just going to remove this distribute contents evenly because I want to make the highlight table wider than the line chart. So in here, let's set this, edit the width, make this 500. Okay, now we can wire up the interactivity. So first things first, let's go to the highlight table. Again, our intention is whenever a cell or a year is clicked, there are two things that need to happen. The line chart needs to be filtered out, and in our dashboard, the slide out chart should show. Once we deselect, the slide out chart should disappear. So let's go back to our highlight table. We're going to accomplish this using a set and a few calculations. So let's start by creating a year calculation first. We can either create our own calculation or we can use the built-in functionality in Tableau that allows you to create custom dates. So when we right click, we create a custom date. And again, for this one, we're just selecting the year. We're going to keep it as date value. Let's call this year. From this year field, we can create a set. So right click, create a set. And for now, let's select all. Now just to test, let's add the year set to detail. Let's display the set, and we are going to add a set action to this worksheet for now. Again, just for testing. Under worksheet, actions, we're going to add a set action. So change set values from the current worksheet, and we are going to target this brand new set. When we clear the selection, we're going to remove all values from the set. And again, we're going to use this later on in the slide out chart. So let's remove all values from set, and we need to make sure that we target our year set. In here, it actually also complains that we are missing a value because remember, we added a year set, but we didn't use the year field in our canvas. So we're just going to add that back to our details. Let's click OK for now, and OK. I'm going to add year back to detail. When I click on 2020, the corresponding value is selected in the set. Click on 2021. Again, 2021 is selected. If we select multiple by control clicking, we should see that both values are also selected. Now remember that dynamic zone visibility has this option under the layout tab that is control visibility using value. And again, in here, when we select this, we have to be able to select a field or a parameter that is a Boolean value. We don't have that yet, so let's create it. Let's go back to the highlight table. What we want to do is create a calculated field that returns true if there's any one year that's selected, and false if none of them are selected. So typically in here, we can use a combination of the set calculation with an LOD. Let's try that out. Create calculated field. Let's call this slide out visibility. Let's count first. If year set, so if there is a selection in the year, then we're going to display the year and then end. Now for our LOD, it needs to be an aggregation. So we're going to wrap this around count distinct. And again, let's just validate. Let's click on apply first. I'm going to keep the calculated field window open. I'm going to move this to our dimension because I just want to display it. Drag this over, again, just for display. Right now, it's 0. So let's select a year, 2020. This should change to 1. If I control click 2 years, it should change to 2. Now let's turn this into a Boolean value. Let's say greater than 0 and apply. Again, this will just evaluate to true if there is at least 1. And if we deselect, the value turns to false. Now here's the thing. As far as the dynamic zone visibility is concerned, this is technically not considered an LOD just because it doesn't have the curly braces outside the whole expression. And to show this, let's go back to our dashboard. In our dashboard, control using visibility, it still doesn't show this calculated field. And the trick in here is to make sure that there are curly braces outside the whole expression. So we do need to have another set of curly braces in here, and it's now going to start showing up in that dropdown. So let's give that a try. Again, curly brace, and then curly brace outside. This value inside is still returning what we call a scalar value. With our LODs, we do need an aggregation. So we do need to wrap this around some other aggregation. And in this case, we can use either a min or a max. Let's just say max and apply again. Now we should be able to see this. So on the drop down, we get our slide out visibility calculated field. Let's click OK. And now we're pretty much ready. Let's select the container for the slide out chart. So double click this, control visibility using, and again, this one, slide out visibility. We can see that it has already disappeared. So let's select 2020. Right now, it still doesn't work just because our initial action was very specific to a worksheet. So we just need to change this to a dashboard action. So dashboard actions, we're going to adjust the current action. Let's edit this. Instead of just for a single worksheet, we're going to change this to our dashboard. So on the drop down, slide out dashboard. It also still gives us a warning that we are missing the field in our line. So let's just add our year field there. Let's click OK and OK. So we are missing our year set field in the line chart. So we're just going to add it. And we actually do need to add it for the filter. So drag year set over to filters. And here there's nothing that's selected. That's why it blanks out. Let's go back to our dashboard. Click on a year. Slide out chart appears. If we deselect, it should disappear. And we can probably clean up that false column. Let's remove that. And this is our final chart. Select multiple years, should work. 3 years, 4 years. The fourth use case is zoom in and out. Basically, you have a series of charts, and when you click on a maximize icon, it maximizes that one chart and hides everything else. Also, the icons will toggle. So if you're in the maximized state, the icon will change. This example is based on Samuel Parsons' dynamic zone zooming Tableau dashboard. So if we see in here, we have a series of charts as well. When you click on a zoom icon, that one chart takes over the whole dashboard, and we can also collapse or minimize that. I've put a link to this dashboard in the description below. I've created a much simplified version so it's easier to demonstrate and walk through, and I've also adjusted some of the techniques. So let's start with the layout. Let's start with an individual chart. The individual chart actually is a horizontal container and a chart. So this is the chart below, but at the top is a blank and an icon inside a horizontal container. Now we basically repeat the same setup 4 times. So you have a top left chart, a top right chart, a bottom left chart, and a bottom right chart. The 2 top charts are also part of another horizontal container, and the bottom charts in its own container. I've pre-created these charts so that we can focus on the zoom in and out functionalities. So here we are in Tableau. These are the 4 charts. I've named them based on their zones: top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. So to start, let's create a parameter. I'm using the Excel helper file from use case 1. One of the tabs here is called the zones, and I'm simply going to use this to create the parameter. So drag menu lists, and here we're going to use the 4 zones. Here in an empty worksheet, let's right click on zone, create, parameter. And in here, I'm going to keep most of the default settings. I'm just going to rearrange the zones. So top left first, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. And let's click OK. Now remember, these are the parameter values. And ultimately, we are going to need to determine whether a specific chart is selected. So what we'll need to do in here is to create an identifier or a name for the zone. We're going to do this by creating a calculated field that has a constant string value. So for example, the top left chart, it should have a value of top left. And again, we're going to create this calculated field for each of the charts. Again, it's like their identifier, it's their ID. So top right for the second one, bottom left for the third, and bottom right for the fourth. We are going to use these calculated fields against the parameter later on. So let's do the first one together, and I'm going to fast forward the creation of the other 3. Let's create calculated field. Let's call this one TL for top left. And this is the selected zone, or essentially the zone name. Again, just a constant string, top left, and OK. So now let's create the other 3. Now I'm also just going to start organizing some of the fields in the sidebar because it's going to get a little bit cluttered. We're going to be creating another few calculated fields. So I'm going to set the sidebar to be grouped by folders. Let's find all the calculated fields. And in here, I'm going to select all 4 of them, right click, folders, create folder, and let's call this zone visibility. Let's click OK, and let's show all the fields again. So after we've created all the calculated fields, let's add them to their respective charts. This is top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. And again, we're going to use this later on against the chosen parameter. Next, let's create our minimize and maximize icons. These icons are already in a folder in the Shapes folder under the My Tableau repository folder, which means our shape palette should be able to pick this up. The name should be called Custom Icons. First, we will need to create a calculated field that allows us to determine which icon to show. Let's display our parameter so we can walk through what the icon should show depending on the parameter choice. So right click, show parameter. Let's move this down here, and I'm just going to change this to a single value list. Now we have 2 icons. The first one is a maximize icon, and the second one is a minimize icon. The maximize icon should show up when the parameter choice is all, meaning all 4 charts should be minimized or they should be small. Now, if any one of the other choices are selected, it means the chart is maximized. Therefore, we need to switch the icon over to a minimize icon, meaning the other charts are not visible because only one is maximized. So let's create this calculated field. So on the dropdown in your sidebar, create calculated field. Let's call this zoom icon. And again, let's check this against our parameter. In here, we want the zone parameter to be not equal to all. So let's walk through this. If the selection is all, this is false, meaning we need to have the maximize icon. Otherwise, this is going to be true, meaning we need the minimize icon. Let's minimize this calculated field editor. Let's click on apply. Let's add our zoom icon to our folder. So under folders, add to folder, zone visibility. Here we need to make sure that our marks is set to shape, and we're going to use the zoom icon in shape. Also, if your shape legend isn't showing, we can show it back in your toolbar on the dropdown. We can go to legends and then show the shape legend. In here, we know the value is false, and what we need is the maximize icon. So we can simply double click on the shape legend. Under the shape palette, custom icons, in here we need the maximize icon. Let's click apply and OK. Now let's toggle our zone parameter. Let's select one of the other values, for example, top left. Double click on the shape icon, so now it changes the value to true. And in here, on the dropdown, custom icons, we need the minimize icon this time. So select, apply, and OK. Let's close the calculated field editor. And let's just check again. So all should be maximized. If we select any of the other ones, it should be minimized. Let's create a copy of this worksheet for each of our zones. Now, similar to what we've done with the charts, where we've assigned a name to each of the charts, we're also going to assign the same name to their corresponding icons. So top left, that's the top left selected zone, top right, bottom left, bottom right. Let's now set up the dashboard. Remember, this is the setup. There's going to be a lot of containers, and we are going to repeat all of these for the 4 different zones. I'll walk you through the top left setup, but we'll fast forward the rest since it's a little repetitive. But even though it's faster, you will still see how the dashboard is constructed. Let's start with the main container first, vertical container. Let's just put 2 blanks here first. Select the container, and let's call this our main dashboard. Let's also make sure for now, let's set to distribute the contents evenly. Let's now add the 2 containers for our top charts and our bottom charts. So the first horizontal container, again, let's place some blanks as placeholders. Rename this first one top chart. And let's create another one, again, blanks for placeholders. Select the container, rename this one to bottom charts. We can now remove some of the placeholder blanks. Remove this one and this one. Let's just double check our layout. In here, we have our main dashboard, we have top charts, and we have our bottom charts. Let's now create our top left chart. So it's going to be a vertical container with the top left chart, and we are going to place a header. And that header is going to be in a horizontal container. So horizontal container to the top, and inside this header, let's add a blank. Let's adjust the size of this header as well. So double click just that particular container, edit height, set this to 50. And now we're going to add the icon. So top left icon, drag it to the right of the inner container, set this one to entire view, and also fix the width. So this is our top left chart. We can do the exact same thing for the other 3 zones. Let's just quickly test our icons. We still have the parameter visible, so let's use that. Later on, we're going to remove this parameter control. Resize this first, move that here. So right now, all is selected. We have the maximize icon for all of these charts. When we change this value, notice a very subtle difference because the icons look very similar, but the arrow should now go down, meaning one of these charts is maximized and the only option is to minimize it again and show all the other charts. Let's select the container of one of these charts. So for example, this top left chart, remember the magic of dynamic zone visibility is being able to select either individual objects or a group of objects within a container and use this control visibility using value, but we don't have this calculated field yet, so we are going to set that up. For example, for the top left chart, when do we want this to be true? Well, this needs to be true if the selected zone is either top left or all. So in our calculated field, let's create a calculated field here. Let's call this top left visibility. So this should be true when the zone parameter is either all or top left. Let's create a similar calculated field for the remainder of the charts. Let's also move all of these other calculated fields into our folder. So let's now wire up all of these zones. For the top left chart, control visibility using top left visibility. For the top right, again, make sure we're selecting the main container for that chart. Double click, top right. Let's just set up our zone parameter as well to show all for now. Bottom left and bottom right. And again, let's just quickly test this out. So all shows all, top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. Here we're going to notice that not the whole space is being taken by that one chart, and usually this is caused by distributing the contents evenly. So let's just make sure that we can show the full chart. Let's show all charts again. Let's go to the item hierarchy. And let's just make sure in the main dashboard, let's see what this is set up to. Right now it's set to distribute contents evenly, so we're just going to simply uncheck this. And let's try the zones again. Top left. There you go. It maximizes for the whole screen. Top right, bottom left, and bottom right. Show all again. The final piece is adding our parameter action. So in here, we just need to make sure that these icons are actually going to change our parameter value. So under dashboard, actions, let's set up the top left first, add action, change parameter. In here, let's uncheck everything first. And what we want is the top left icon. It should change our target parameter, and the value should be the top left selected zone. And again, this value will only appear if you have that field in the icon worksheet. Clearing the selection will set the value to all. And let's click OK. Let's just rename this as well. This is our top left icon parameter. So now let's test this first before we create the rest. Let's click on OK. And now when I click on this icon, it should maximize. When I click on the icon again, it should minimize because again, clearing the selection will set the default value to all. And now it's just a matter of creating all of those parameter actions for the top right chart, bottom left chart, and the bottom right chart. We covered a lot. We started with the basics and walked through 4 common use cases. Dynamic zone visibility is an amazing new feature in Tableau that really opens up different kinds of opportunities for different interactivities and different kinds of combinations of charts. It has simplified how to make things appear and disappear in dashboards, and this used to be a complicated process. However, we still need to identify in what scenarios these will be helpful. For example, in scenarios where you may need to print or email charts or dashboards, let's say on a subscription, sometimes having different dashboards instead of collapsing containers might be more helpful. We also need to think about maintainability. It may get to a point where we have a lot of additional calculated fields and containers, and we already have a lot of calculated fields and containers in the first place. So it's always going to be a balancing act between functionality, performance, and maintainability. And that's it for this video. Again, thank you so much for your time and support, and I will see you again next time.